Bonsoir, French students. I hope you're doing well. Well, this is going to be our second to last video for chapitre préliminaire before your first exam. So it's just this short video, one more short one, and we're ready for the first exam. So the topic of this video is des expressions utiles. You can probably guess a lot about what this means just from being an English speaker. So you already know the word expression, so we know that this is about expressions, things that we say. Utile is going to be the same thing pretty much as useful. So we know that this is about some useful expressions. So as it tells us here at the top, le professeur dit aux étudiants. So a couple of things I'll say about this. First, you notice that part of this word is in parentheses, right? So why is that? And that's just because in France, and I'm sure many other French-speaking countries, people drop part of this word. Instead of saying le professeur, they just say le prof. So it's like a short kind of slang way of saying professor. We might even say that in English sometimes, like, hey, prof. Not that much, but sometimes English speakers will do that too. And we chop off lots of other words and turn them into more informal words. And so the rest of the sentence, le professeur or le prof dit. Okay, so you notice that the T at the end of this verb, which means says, is a silent T. So le professeur dit aux étudiants. And notice there is a little connection here between this X at the end of O and the word that comes after it, étudiant. And why is that? Because the word étudiant begins with a vowel sound. If it were beginning with a consonant sound, that X would be silent. It would just be O. But in this case, because we have an X at the end of one word and a vowel sound beginning in the next word, we're going to do a liaison, a connection. So, le professeur dit aux étudiants. Okay, so one thing I'll point out with all these expressions we see on this slide is kind of the anchor word of each of the sentences that you see here. We see words like ouvrez, lisez, fermez, écoutez, écrivez. They all sound a little similar. They all have something in common, right? And that thing that they have in common is the ending, the EZ on the end of every one of these verbs. And that's because all of them are verbs or action words, but they're in a command form. And we do this in English too. You tell people to do things. Okay? You might say, open your books, read exercise A, close your book, listen to the question, write the response. So a teacher would say that in English too. So this just happens to be the same thing in French. You'll also notice in all of these cases where this EZ is on the end of the verb, it's referring to a group of people. Command forms would be a little different if you're talking to an individual person, and that's something you'll learn later on in your French studies. But for now, just know that that EZ on the end is referring to maybe a whole class of students. So this first expression we see right here, ouvrez votre livre à la page 23. Okay, we learned the numbers a little bit earlier on, so hopefully those are familiar to you. Okay, so ouvrez just means open your book. Okay, so these students in this picture right here obviously are reading books. The arrow indicates that they're, opening the book and reading inside of it. And so on your exam, you might see some similar expressions and similar kinds of pictures that will ask you to kind of identify what the teacher is telling the students. So, ouvrez, open, votre livre, your book, à la page 23, to page 23. Hey, lisez is to read. So, lisez l'exercice A. Lisez l'exercice A. Read exercise A. Of course, this is another word that's going to look very familiar to us as English speakers, exercise. Okay, and fermez votre livre. So close your book. Okay? And over here we have écouter, which means to listen. So, écoutez la question. So, what do you think that might mean? It's listen to the question. Et répondez. Okay, that looks like what word in English? respond, right? So listen to the question and respond avec une phrase complète. So with a phrase is not phrase. This word doesn't translate as phrase. It actually means sentence. So it's one of those words we call a false friend. It looks like a word we know in English, but it may have a somewhat different meaning. So écoutez la question et répondez avec une phrase complète. So listen to the question and respond with a complete sentence. And finally, écrivez la réponse au tableau. Okay, écrivez is the verb for write. So write the response or write the answer au tableau. What do you think tableau might be? If this goes with this picture right here, what could it be? A chalkboard. Okay, and of course nowadays we often use a whiteboard rather than a traditional blackboard or chalkboard. But tableau, I imagine, refers to all of those things in modern society. Okay, so these are definitely some expressions that would be very useful to you, especially if you're in an in-person, face-to-face French class. But even if we are in a virtual class, an online class, it's still important to learn these expressions because one day you may be studying in an in-person class. Okay, we will move on. Okay, so a few other useful expressions. So again, we're going to focus our attention on the anchor word or the anchor verb of each of these commands. So prenez is going to come from the verb prendre, which actually means to take. So prenez votre cahier. You've probably figured out that votre means your. So take your. And this is a word that's going to be new to you as well. Cahier, cahier. The H is silent here, so you're really blending together two vowel sounds. So aïe, cahier. Prenez votre cahier. So take your notebook. Du papier. What do you think papier might be? Paper, of course. It's really similar to what we would see in English. Et un crayon. A crayon is going to look like crayon to us, of course, but it's actually not a crayon. This is another example of a false friend. So crayon is going to be a pencil ou un stylo. So stylo is a pen. So take your notebook, some paper, and a pencil or pen. Prenez votre cahier, du papier, et un crayon ou un stylo. Okay, so the teacher is just asking the students to get ready with something to write with and something to write on. Okay, this verb you see right here, fait, it has lots of silent letters in it, right? The E and the S and even the vowel in the middle doesn't sound like what you would expect, but it's just fait. And it comes from the verb faire, which means to do. So, faites l'exercice A. What do you think it might mean? If faites means do, what is the teacher asking the students to do? To do exercise A, right? Avec un autre étudiant ou une autre étudiante. So what's the difference there? You probably guessed it by now. If you add an E to the article, a becomes une, and if you add an E to étudiant, it's just transforming it from a masculine to a feminine form. So it depends on who the teacher is referring to. So, faites l'exercice A avec une autre étudiante. So if she had lots of girls in the class, women in the class, she might say that to the group. Okay, and then these two down here, you already know étudier, right? This one should be familiar from our previous slide. So study what? Étudier les mots. Okay, in this word, both the T and the S are going to be silent. Mot is word. Oh, étudier les mots de vocabulaire. And what do you imagine vocabulaire is? It looks just like our English word vocabulary, and that's exactly what it is. Étudier les mots de vocabulaire. And then finally, we already learned about faites, right? This means to do something, or when you're telling a whole group of people, do something. Faites les devoirs. Okay? Les devoirs, in case you're not familiar with this word yet, it actually means literally obligations. Like the verb devoir means to have to do something, to be obligated to do something. So if you make it plural, les devoirs, it actually becomes the tasks or the jobs or the chores that you have to do. And it refers to homework also. So faites les devoirs en ligne. Can you guess what en ligne might mean? Especially if you're matching up this sentence with this woman over here who's sitting in front of a computer. She's doing her homework online, right? And that's exactly what you're doing for this class. So I might have to tell you this coming Sunday when I give you reminders about your work to do for the week, I'm going to be telling you, faites les devoirs en ligne. Do your homework online or do your online homework. So that will be a great reminder for you as you get ready to do your next set of mind tap exercises. Okay, and finally, this final slide gives you kind of a collection of different expressions that might be useful, especially in a face-to-face French classroom. So we've already seen the word comment earlier in the first week or so of our French course, like comment allez-vous? So basically, comment in any expression where you see it means how, okay, or it can mean what. So comment? Répétez, s'il vous plaît. So comment is kind of like the polite way to ask someone what they just said. Like in English, we might say, what was that? That would be the polite way to ask. Comment serves the same purpose. Okay, répétez, I'm sure you can pretty much figure out what that is, even if you didn't have the translation over here. And everybody has heard of s'il vous plaît, right? It's the formal way of saying please. And just as a little kind of factoid, I guess, if you will, if you get an invitation from somebody that says RSVP, in case you didn't know what that stands for, it's actually, the R is for répondez, like we saw répond in the previous slides, or la réponse, which means to answer. S'il vous plaît means please. So the SVP of RSVP is s'il vous plaît. So it actually means répondez s'il vous plaît. Like please answer, please let us know if you're coming or not. So in case you didn't know that before, now you do. Okay, the next three expressions that you see here all have a similar verb, right? So comprenez, comprend, and ne comprend pas. If you remember the ne and the pas, before and after a verb just makes it negative. It's like not in English. What verb in English does this look like? You can probably make a guess by looking at the translation understand, but it reminds me of comprehend. Like to comprehend is a synonym for understand, right? So if you remember comprenez as like comprehend or comprehension, that should help you remember the meaning of it. So vous comprenez? Okay, do you understand? Oui, je comprends. So yes, I understand. Or non, je ne comprends pas. Okay, and you notice that the form of this verb is a little different depending on who we're talking about or who's doing the speaking. So when it's vous comprenez, we're talking to a big group of people, or maybe one person in the formal form. Okay, je comprends or je ne comprends pas, I'm talking about myself. Je means I. Okay, and we see comment again here, which means how or what. So, comment dit-on the homework en français? So with this question, I'm trying to find out how to say a word. Maybe I'm an English speaker. Of course, I already know what homework means, but I want to find out how to say it in French. So I might ask a native speaker to tell me how to say that word. And notice that we have another liaison here. So the T at the end of dit is normally silent, but when it's followed by a word that begins with a vowel, we're going to pronounce that T. So, comment dit-on the homework en français? And that person might tell me, on dit les devoirs. So we notice now the T is silent in dit, right? So on is kind of another, maybe more informal way of saying we. Okay, so you'll see both the words nous and we, or nous and on, that refer to we or us. So on dit les devoirs can mean one says, or it can mean like in general people say that. Okay, this expression, que veut dire votre? So what does votre mean? So in this case, this is a great question to ask, what does a word in French mean? So maybe the other person is going to explain to you in French what it means, or they might give you an English translation for it, but this is a great way to ask that question. And what it literally means is, que is what, veut means want, dire means say. So it's kind of like saying, what does that word want to say? In other words, what does it mean? So that's kind of a good way to remember what that expression or that question means. A really good expression for anyone who's learning a language and doesn't know something. Sometimes you just have to say, I don't know. You might need to say, je ne sais pas. So je being I, sais is the form of the verb to know that goes with je. So I know, and ne pas makes it not. I do not know. And if you're speaking quickly, people are speaking informally, instead of saying je ne sais pas, they're going to say je ne sais pas. So you can practice saying that really fast. Je ne sais pas, je ne sais pas, I don't know. Okay, and just like we see with this question up here, que veut dire votre? Okay, what does votre want to say? What does it mean? Ça veut dire means that wants to say, or it means your. No, ça veut dire your. And finally, a few expressions you've probably heard before somewhere in the past, especially if you've studied French before, or just in general, we've heard these expressions because French is a pretty well-known language. So merci, merci bien. So thank you or thanks. De rien means you're welcome. It literally means it's nothing or of nothing. So de means of, rien means nothing. So put it together and you get you're welcome. And then to excuse yourself, you can use one of these two expressions, pardon or excusez-moi. We've all heard of excusez-moi, right? Okay, so I hope that these will be useful expressions not only for studying French in general, but if you're taking other French courses in the future in an in-person format, your instructor will probably use all of these expressions. So one more video to come for le chapitre préliminaire, and we will be all ready for contrôle or examen 1, so exam 1. So I hope you all have a good night. Bonne nuit!